Hello, my name is Chris McCormack, Associate Director of PEGTV and Program Coordinator for Channel 15 Public Access Television. Prior to this position, and several decades ago, I worked for our family-owned radio station, WHWB AM, and later WHWB FM, located in Proctor, directly across the road from the Wilson Castle estate. WHWB AM was established in 1949 as a daytime radio station, operating from sunrise to sunset at an assigned frequency of 1,000 on the dial. It was here where my father, the late Frank McCormack, began his broadcasting career, becoming manager and part owner until the sale of the station in 1984. While WHWB AM went dark in the 1990s, WHWB FM would evolve into WJJR and relocate to the Opera House in downtown Rutland. It was during my dad's tenure at WHWB AM in the 1950s that a recording we will hear shortly came to be. It spoke specifically to the Irish population in the region. It came about by special invitation from WHWB to then Rutland City Mayor Dan Healy. Mayor Healy served the city of Rutland from 1949 to 1957. He lost his re-election bid in 1957 to Francis Waterman, only to roar back in 1959 for another final two-year term. Mayor Healy was described as beloved and colorful, the champion of the poor, with great humility and dignity. He was one of the first Irish Catholic Democrats to live in the Rutland area and said to be friends with Adlai Stevenson and President John F. Kennedy. He lived on Forest Street and later on South Street in Rutland. He was invited to WHWB to deliver a St. Patrick's Day address to listeners with his trademark booming voice and charming personality. You can hear in his voice the special pleasure he felt in addressing the Rutland community about what is it to be Irish all those years ago. If he did indeed actually deliver his address on St. Patrick's Day to a live audience, it most likely would have occurred in this on-air studio. It's possible the message was pre-recorded and then aired on St. Patrick's Day. Either way, we know Mayor Healy's address, "What is it to be Irish?" was recorded on reel-to-reel tape with a real possibility, pun intended, that it was this very machine. Looking back on the making of this 1950s recording, we can visualize Mayor Healy walking through these doors of the converted barn housing WHWB. He would have proceeded down a long hallway to the rear of the building where the on-air and recording studios were situated. This address would become an annual tradition for many years, every March 17th on WHWB, up until 1984 when the radio station was sold. The story might have ended there, as the recording was stored away in a cardboard box for many years with my family's radio station memorabilia. In late 2017, Jack Healy, no relation to Mayor Dan Healy, inquired about the whereabouts of the recording as he had remembered it from his days at WHWB, adding he would be interested in re-airing it on WSYB, his current employer. The thought then occurred to me that maybe we could digitize it and perhaps enhance it with some music and photos for a PEGTV version as well. That's where Jeff Adamson and my brother Greg McCormack of Lake Street and Radio come in. With their assistance, this 60-year-old audio file has been converted from tape to a digital format. With the help of Ben Burdge and myself, Chris McCormack, we've tried to clean it up as best we could. Ray Mooney added some historical research, and with the magical editing of Ben, what for so many years had been exclusively an audio file has now been turned into a video work of art. So now it's my sincere pleasure to highlight some WHWB history, and more importantly, Rutland history, as we present former Rutland City Mayor Dan Healy with What Is It to Be Irish?
I first wish to express my sincere appreciation to station WHWB for their cordial invitation to address you on this St. Patrick's Day. This morning's mail brought to me a beautiful card titled, "What is it to be Irish?" And I could not let this occasion go by without reading the beautiful words and sentiments expressed in this card. What is it to be Irish? How can you put the wonder of it into words? If a psychiatrist stretched himself out on his own warm couch after his last customer had gone home, and he dreamed of the man he himself would most like to be, well, he might be perfect, but he'd still be only half an Irishman on St. Patrick's Day. What is it to be Irish? It is to have an angel in your mouth, turning your prose to poetry. It is to have the gift of tongues, to know the language of all living things. Does an Irishman pause and turn an ear to a tree? It is because on this day he wants to hear what one sleepy bud says to another as it opens its pale green hands to the warm sun of spring. What is it to be Irish? Oh, on this day it is music. Not just the cornet and the parading high school band, but the deep, deep music of living, the low, sad rhythms of eternity. The Irishman hears the high song of the turning spheres, the dim lullaby of the worm in its cocoon. All the world is in tune, and he is in step with the tune that only he can hear. What is it to be Irish? It is to live the whole history of his race between a dawn and a dawn. The long wrongs, the bird's swift joys, the endless hurt of his ancestors since the morning of time in the forgotten forest, the knock at his heart that is part of his religion. What is it to be Irish? It isn't only the realization that he is descended from kings. It is the realization that he is a king himself, an empire on 2 feet, striding in power, a strolling continent of awe. What is it to be Irish? Why, on St. Patrick's Day, to be Irish is to know more glory, adventure, magic, victory, exultation, gratitude, and gladness than any other man can experience in a lifetime. What is it to be Irish? It is to walk in complete mystic understanding with God for 24 wonderful hours. I have been invited to speak on the meaning of St. Patrick's Day, and I am indeed delighted to do so on this 17th day of March, the feast day of Ireland's great patron saint. For centuries, people of Irish descent have honored St. Patrick on this day, and the practice of wearing a bit of green has become quite common among Americans of every racial background. Back in Theodore Roosevelt's time, he once remarked, "On March 17th, everyone wants to be a McSomething," and so it seems today. Indeed, as far back as 1776, the day was recognized by the people of this country. In that year, while encamped at Cambridge, Massachusetts, General George Washington issued an order dated March 16th, making the password for the Revolutionary Army for the 17th of March St. Patrick, and appointed General John Sullivan as officer of the day. To those not of Irish descent, it may be a little difficult to understand the reverence the descendants of the Irish race has for St. Patrick. To begin with, the Irishman is somewhat of a mystic. He is definitely a sentimentalist. His roots are as old as time, and his nature is profoundly spiritual. You have undoubtedly heard the expression many times that St. Patrick drove the snakes out of Ireland. Well, actually, there are no snakes in Ireland today, and there were none when St. Patrick landed there 1,500 years ago. But this fact has not discouraged legend from crediting him with having banished the snakes from the Emerald Isle. The snakes in the legend are perhaps best identified with the serpent in the Garden of Eden. History tells us that when Niall of the 9 hostages returned to Ireland from an expedition to the continent, he brought with him a number of captives, among whom was Patricius, son of Calpurnius, a Roman officer who had married a Gaelic maiden named Conchessa, sister of St. Martin, Bishop of Tours. The boy, Patricius, was about 16 years of age when Niall carried him off from his home, and for 7 years he served as a slave, finally escaping to return to his home in Gaul. Following his escape, his parents put him under the tutelage of his uncle, the Bishop of Tours, and he advanced rapidly in learning and piety. During his period of captivity, Patricius had become greatly attached to the Irish people, and when his education was finished, the desire grew within him to return to Ireland to convert the people to Christianity. Learning of his great zeal and his consuming desire to spread the gospel among the Irish, Pope Celestine consecrated him a bishop and sent him officially to Christianize the island. Thus did St. Patrick become the apostle to Ireland. Soon Patrick was directed to come to the city of Tara to debate the question of religion with the Druids, who were the priests of the pagans. He appeared on an Easter Sunday, and history relates that it seemed as if on that day all nature was arrayed on behalf of the apostle. The sun was shining, the air was clear, and the sky told of the infinite control that was not of earth. St. Patrick spoke on the doctrine of the Trinity, and in searching for a practical way to explain the doctrine, he spied the little trefoil, the shamrock of Aaron. Stooping, he plucked it, and raising it aloft, pointed to the 3 parts growing on one stem and forming one leaf, yet with each part distinct in itself. Thus did the shamrock become the symbol of Christian Ireland. It is revered today as the national flower of the land. Patrick's crusade to build up an Irish Christian culture began upon his return to Ireland in the year 432. And from that time on, the history of Ireland is the history of the survival of the Christian religion, which he brought to the island against all sorts of prosecution and persecution. For the years 600 to 1600, Ireland became known as the land of saints and scholars, and a civilization second to none was established and flourished until the 1600s, when Britain invasion menaced it. History tells us that in that year, 1640, Cromwell, under orders from the Crown, landed in Dublin with a force of 17,000 British soldiers, and imbued with the demoniacal hatred of the Irish, and fanatically pledged to a complete extermination of the people of Ireland. At Drogheda, a human holocaust took place which paled any of Hitler's. Cromwell turned his butchering forces loose in the populace for a 3-day orgy of slaughter of the entire population, which saw gutters run full of the blood of the victims, men, women, and children. History further records that after the Cromwell invasion, more than 1/2 of the people of Ireland had perished between the years 1641 and 1652. About this same time, the reigning Queen Elizabeth died, a raving maniac, and she was succeeded by James I of England, who coveted Ireland, and particularly the more prosperous counties of the north. It was a simple matter to trump up charges that the northern chiefs had been conspiring against England, and their estates were declared forfeit for distribution among James' followers. About 4 million acres were confiscated, and the natives were driven out to the bogs and moors. The new people, followers of James, to whom the land was given, were specifically bound to repress and abhor the Irish natives, particularly their religion, and these conditions have continued through hundreds of years. 6 northern counties were involved in this so-called Ulster plantation, and the residents of these counties have come to be known as Orangemen. This accounts for the division of Ireland in the northern and southern factions. As a consequence of the repeated efforts to confiscate their lands, deprive them of religious freedom, and even to physically eliminate them, the people of Ireland in the early 18th century started an exodus to other countries, particularly to America. Even before the Revolutionary War, tens of thousands of Irish had come to America. Thousands fought with our forces in the Revolution. The signatures of 3 men born in Ireland are on the Declaration of Independence. 6 others were generals in Washington's army. Today, I would like to paraphrase a greeting Franklin Roosevelt once used in addressing a gathering of important Americans. He said, "My dear fellow immigrants, let us think for a moment just how much meaning can be derived from such a simple greeting. Aren't we all, in the final analysis, fellow immigrants in the sense that our father, grandfather, or great-grandfather were born on foreign soil and came to these United States as an immigrant? And why did they come here? They came because America had the welcome mat out for all oppressed people. They came for the same reason the settlers at Plymouth Rock came: to avoid oppression, excessive taxation, religious persecution. They came here to seek the freedom they wanted more than life itself. They came here to seek a fuller life for themselves and their families. The Irish didn't find the streets of America paved with gold, but they found perhaps a rarer and more valuable ore for those who were prepared to mine it. They found opportunity. Perhaps the greatest exodus from Ireland to America occurred following the potato famine of 1845, 46, and 47, which plunged the country into deep distress. It has been estimated that during the famine, 1 million people died, either of starvation or accompanying diseases, and another 1 million emigrated to foreign lands between 1846 and 1850. The hundreds of thousands of Irish who came to America's shores remained constantly mindful of those they left behind in abject poverty, and it wasn't long before many thousands of dollars were being sent back to the old sod. And as the Irish in America became more fully conscious of their power to help their people at home, they exerted a tremendous influence upon England, which finally realized that they were no longer dealing with a lone island held in subjugation, but one backed by the public opinion and contributions of a continent which drew a parallel between the suspension of civil rights in Ireland and the subjection of Boston to martial law in the 1770s. The great migration from Ireland is over now, and the Irish Americans are no longer a distinct class in the American population. They have become completely American, and with the freedom of Ireland finally achieved, the strong links that bound them to the mother country no longer exist. What remains are links of sentiment and nostalgia that are still the occasion for Irish Americans to celebrate on St. Patrick's Day. The Irish immigrants of yesteryear did what every foreign-born group must do to earn the name American. They fought with an unrelenting courage in the economic, political, and military battles of their new country. They were discriminated against, but they fought all the harder. They did not desert their faith, nor did they forget their homeland. They were not lost working in the mines, on the railroads or canals, or in the various American wars in which they participated. It is indeed significant of the St. Patrick's Day observance that the wearing of the green on the feast day of Ireland's patron saint is no longer restricted to the Irish. Americans of every racial background will wear a bit of green in honor of Ireland's great day. There is something profoundly touching in this tribute to the patron saint of the Emerald Isle, who so zealously taught the word of God to the Irish race that it has served them down through the centuries as the saving strength of the indomitable character of its people and made them a great race despite the size of their tiny country. The historian Plowden has this to say about the land of the Shamrock. Ireland stands conspicuous among the nations of the universe, a solitary instance in which neither the destructive hand of time, nor the devastating arm of oppression, nor the widest variety of changes in the political system of government could alter or subdue, much less wholly extinguish, the national genius, spirit, and character of its people. The spirit of the Irishman is evidenced and proclaimed in his celebration of this great holy day. He has an ever-present effusive spirit of inner happiness, so well described by that eminent Irish-American churchman, Richard Cardinal Cushing of Boston, in his lilting poem, Ode to an Irishman, which I quote in part. There's nothing like an Irishman to chase your cares away. There's nothing like an Irish laugh to brighten up the day. No matter how dark the skies grow, how great or small the pain, it only takes an Irishman to make things right as rain.
Danny boy, the pipes are calling from glen to glen and down the mountainside. The summer's gone and all the roses falling. 'Tis you must go, and I must bide. But come ye back when summer's in the meadow, or when the valleys hush and white with snow. 'Tis I'll be here in sunshine or in shade.